In 1994, on the streets of Hell's Kitchen, New York, a young boy named Matt Murdock saw an elderly man about to be struck by a truck. Without thinking, Matt rushed forward and pushed him out of the way. The truck swerved, but its cargo of unmarked chemical barrels spilled across the street, and the toxic substance splashed directly into Matt's eyes. Slowly, over the hours that followed, the light faded from his world. But what those chemicals took from Matt, they replaced with something else. His remaining senses sharpened past anything human. His hearing could pick up a heartbeat across a room. His touch could read ink from a printed page. His sense of balance in space became so precise he could move through a fight like he was seeing it. He didn't understand the gift yet. It would be years before he did. But the blind boy from Hell's Kitchen would grow into something the criminals of New York would learn to fear. That same year, in the middle of the American heartland, another kind of darkness was unfolding. A family lived in a quiet Ohio suburb. A father named Alexei, a mother named Melina, and their two young daughters, Natasha and Yelena. Yelena chasing fireflies in the backyard at dusk. Natasha riding her bike down the street. American Pie playing on the radio. 3 years of American life, picture perfect. None of it was real. They were deep-cover Soviet operatives planted by the Red Room. A secret Russian program built on a simple and terrifying idea. A woman could walk into places a man never could. She could slip past guards, sit across from powerful men, and finish a mission before anyone ever realized she was the threat. The Red Room took young girls from their families, stripped them of their names and identities, and reshaped them into living weapons. Elite assassins who could become anyone, infiltrate anywhere, and disappear without a trace. They called them Black Widows. And the Ohio mission had been theirs. Infiltrate a nearby Hydra research facility and steal their work on mind control, the same science that built the Winter Soldier. In 1995, the mission ended. Their cover blew. The four of them fled under heavy fire in a small plane, young Natasha at the controls after her mother was shot, tearing out of American airspace. They landed in Cuba, where a man named Dreykov was waiting, the head of the Red Room. The data was his, and now the girls would go back where they belonged. Natasha was 11. She had already spent years in the Red Room before Ohio, and she knew what was waiting. The training, the conditioning, the way they broke you down until nothing soft remained. Her 6-year-old sister didn't know any of it. Yelena still believed the family had been real. They were both sent back. For years they would be trained to fight, to kill, to feel nothing. The family that had never been real was gone, and what remained were 2 girls learning to become Black Widows. It would be 21 years before they found each other again, and by the time they did, one of them would be fighting on the other side of the world, standing shoulder to shoulder with Earth's greatest heroes. Far from Earth, a different story was playing out. 6 years had passed since the Kree pulled Carol Danvers out of the wreckage of Mar-Vell's engine and remade her as one of their own. They called her Vers now, a warrior of the Empire and a member of Starforce, the Kree's elite unit. Everything she had been before, Earth, her name, the people who had loved her, was gone. As far as she knew, she had always been Kree. In 1995, on a border planet called Torfa, everything she thought she knew began to unravel. Torfa was a hiding place for the last of the Skrulls, refugees led by a general named Talos. Years ago, Talos had trusted Mar-Vell with everything. His people, his wife, his daughter, all handed over for safekeeping when she promised to find a way to get them out of Kree reach. So when Mar-Vell went silent, they all went silent with her. Talos had spent years searching for any trace of them. Every trail went cold, until a Kree operative was sent to investigate the Skrull presence on Torfa, and Talos got to him first. The Skrulls had technology the Kree never expected them to have, a memory probe that could reach inside a mind and pull out what was buried. Talos used it and set a trap. When Starforce came to rescue their agent, they walked into it. And out of every Starforce member who could have gotten caught, powers of the scriptwriter folks, Vers was the one who did. Strapped into the same machine, her memories began leaking out in front of Talos, and what he saw stopped him. Mar-Vell, alive, a test flight, a crash, a planet no one would think to search, small and overlooked on every map he had ever seen. Mar-Vell had been hiding there the whole time, and this Kree warrior in his machine had been there with her. Talos set course for Earth. Before he could pull more from her, Vers broke free, fought her way through the ship, and escaped in a pod that tore through the atmosphere and crashed through the roof of a Blockbuster Video in Los Angeles. She didn't know where she was. But something about this place felt strangely familiar. On Earth, two young S.H.I.E.L.D. agents found her, Nick Fury and Phil Coulson. With their help, she pieced the rest of her life back together. Talos found her too, and together they tracked down his family on Mar-Vell's orbital lab. Years of searching ended in a single moment. And when Carol finally stood face to face again with the man who had taken her life from her, she let go of the conditioning that had chained her power. What came out of her was beyond anything in this galaxy. She tore through a Kree fleet that came to silence her, burned ships across the atmosphere like falling stars, and sent the survivors home with a message. She left Earth that year to take the fight back to the Kree homeworld, to free her fellow captives from the supreme intelligence that had controlled them for centuries, the same way it had controlled her. Before she left, she gave Fury a pager. If the world ever faced something humanity couldn't handle, he could use it to call her back. A promise and a last resort. Fury walked away from all of it changed. He also walked away with one less eye, thanks to a cat named Goose who turned out not to be a cat at all. What stayed with him was bigger than any of it. He had seen what one person with real power could do, and he began to wonder what the world might look like if he could find more of them, bring them together, and get them ready for whatever came next. He started putting something together. Just an idea at first, rough, unnamed. He would come to call it the Avengers Initiative. In the 2 years that followed, Fury and Talos worked out a quiet arrangement between them. The Skrulls would stay on Earth and serve as Fury's invisible eyes and ears, and in return, Fury and Carol would one day find them a home of their own. Both sides signed on in good faith. Whether that promise would actually be kept is a story for another time. Far away in the mountains of China, the sacred village of Ta Lo had spent thousands of years guarding the Dark Gate, hidden from the outside world. For those who don't remember, we talked about Ta Lo all the way back in episode 1, so go check that one out if you need a refresher. In 1996, the village caught the attention of Xu Wenwu. He had run out of kingdoms to take, so he had moved on to chasing legends. Ta Lo was one of them. When he reached its gate, a guardian named Ying Li was waiting for him. She fought him to a standstill, and then, somehow, she loved him. For the first time in 1,000 years, Wenwu set the rings down. He stayed with Ying Li, and they had 2 children together, a daughter named Xialing and a son named Shang-Chi, who would one day stand against his own father. Whether the warlord could really walk away from the life he had built was a question waiting for its answer. That same year, in 1996, a 9-year-old boy named Mark Spector lost his younger brother in an accident. His mother blamed him for it, and day after day she punished him for surviving. The weight of it was more than a child's mind could carry, and somewhere inside him, a door opened. A new person stepped through. His name was Stephen Grant, quiet and gentle, and he took the pain Mark couldn't. For the rest of his life, Mark would be more than one person, and one day, the world would come to know all of them. That same year, somewhere over the Himalayas, a private plane fell out of the sky. On board was a wealthy American businessman named Wendell Rand, who ran one of the largest corporations in New York. He was on a trip to Asia with his wife Heather and their 10-year-old son, Danny. Only one of them walked away from the crash. Danny was found in the snow by monks from Kunlun, the same hidden city we covered back in episode 1. They took him in, raised him, and over the next 15 years, they would train him for the rite that every generation of Kunlun produced, the trial of Shao Lao the Undying. The next Iron Fist had just survived a plane crash. He didn't know it yet. In 1998, Nick Fury fell in love with one of his own assets. Her name was Vara, a Skrull who had stayed behind on Earth as part of Talos' network and worked closely with Fury for years. The relationship was real on both sides. They would eventually marry, and the world would never know. It's time to step into a new reality. On Earth 26,320, vampires were real, and they had been quietly building their power for centuries. The man hunting them was Eric Brooks, better known as Blade. His mother had been bitten by a vampire while she was pregnant with him, and the bite passed something on. Blade had been born somewhere between the two worlds, fully human in the things that hurt vampires, with all the vampire strength and speed on top of it. They called him the Daywalker. In 1998, Blade closed in on Deacon Frost, a powerful vampire who had been trying to summon La Magra, an ancient blood god whose return would have ended humanity. Blade stopped him before the ritual could finish. He also found out that night that Frost was the one who had bitten his mother all those years ago. The vampire he had spent his life hunting had been the reason he existed in the first place. Back on Earth 616 in 1999, the country of Sokovia had been torn apart by war for years, and on one quiet evening, it came for the Maximoff family. A shell tore through their apartment building. Their parents didn't survive. Young Wanda and Pietro, somehow still alive, found themselves trapped under the rubble with a Stark Industries missile sitting a few feet away, the Stark logo stamped on its side, unexploded. For 2 days, they waited. Every shift of the debris, every tick from the warhead could have been the last thing they ever heard. The missile never went off, but something else took root in that rubble instead. A hatred for the name on the side of that shell, and a sister who would carry that hatred with her for years to come. Out in deep space in the year 2000, a different kind of horror was doing its work. His name was Thanos, and he came from a planet called Titan that had once been thriving. Titan had outgrown its resources, and its people had ignored Thanos when he warned them what was coming. He proposed a brutal solution: take out half the population at random and let the other half live. The Titans called him a madman and refused. Then their world died exactly the way he said it would. Titan became a graveyard, and Thanos walked away from it carrying one belief he would never let go of. The universe was running out of room, and someone had to make the cut. So he went planet to planet doing it himself. By 2000, he was already deep into his work. On a small world called Zen-Huberi, his army rounded up the population and split them in half. And as they did, Thanos noticed a small girl who fought back harder than anyone twice her size. He pulled her aside while his soldiers ended her parents and the rest of her people. He took her with him when he left. He named her Gamora, and he raised her to be the deadliest woman in the galaxy. That same year, a family was driving home from a trip when an argument between two siblings distracted the father just long enough. The car hit the truck in front of it. A 14-year-old girl named Jessica Jones was the only one who walked out of the wreckage alive. She thought she was. She woke up in a hospital weeks later, told that her parents and her brother were gone, and was taken in by a kind family who promised to raise her as their own. What no one told her was that during her coma, a private medical company called IGH had quietly experimented on her. When she woke up, she was stronger than any 14-year-old should ever be. And somewhere out of sight, her mother was waking up too. In 2002, back on Earth 26,320, a new kind of creature started showing up across Europe. They were called Reapers. They were faster, stronger, and hungrier than vampires. And unlike vampires, they fed on humans and vampires alike. To everyone outside the inner circle, it looked like a mutation, a natural strain of the vampire virus that had spiraled out of control. The Reapers spread fast, and the vampire elders, looking at extinction for the first time in their lives, came to the one man who could actually stop them: Blade. The one leading them was Eli Damaskinos, an ancient pure-blood vampire who had been alive for thousands of years and looked every day of it. He offered Blade the Blood Pack, a unit of vampire warriors who had originally been trained to take him down, and asked him to fight alongside them. He took the deal. Together, they hunted the Reapers through the sewers of Prague. Somewhere in those tunnels, his own team turned on him. The Blood Pack had been waiting for this moment. They overpowered him, captured him, and brought him back to Damaskinos' compound, exactly where Damaskinos had wanted him from the start. That's where the truth came out. The Reapers weren't a mutation. They had been engineered, and the story Damaskinos had spun about hunting them had been a setup. What he actually wanted was Blade's blood. Damaskinos had been trying to engineer a new kind of vampire, one immune to sunlight, silver, and garlic, a bloodline that wouldn't have to hide anymore. He had even tested the work on his own son, a man named Nomak, and the experiment had turned the boy into the very first Reaper. The process wasn't working on its own, but Blade was already the thing Damaskinos was trying to build, and with enough of his blood, the rest would fall into place. In the chaos that followed, Nomak finally got his hands on his father, and Damaskinos paid for what he had done. But Nomak wasn't done. He wanted every drop of his father's bloodline gone, and that meant his sister too. Her name was Nyssa, the one member of the Blood Pack who had ever treated Blade with any decency. So when Nomak came for her, Blade ran him through with his own sword. The bloodline that was supposed to change the world ended that night on the floor of Damaskinos' compound. That same year, in another reality entirely, a different kind of hero was about to be born. On Earth 96,283, a high school student in Queens, New York named Peter Parker went on a school field trip to Oscorp, one of the largest biotech companies in the city, run by a brilliant scientist named Norman Osborn. Peter was the school paper's photographer, so he was busy taking pictures when a genetically modified spider landed on his hand and bit him. By the next morning, his body had changed. He could see clearer than he ever had before. He could lift things he shouldn't have been able to lift. He could stick to walls. At first, Peter used what was happening to him for himself. He needed money, so he found a way to make some. But that was before his Uncle Ben was taken from him by a robber Peter could have stopped earlier and didn't. And it was in that moment that the words his uncle had said to him only hours before became the famous line the world would remember forever. With great power comes great responsibility. So he put a mask on and started swinging through New York. The press would give him a name soon enough: Spider-Man. His first real fight came from a place closer to home than he expected. Peter's best friend Harry Osborn was Norman's son, and Norman had been working on an experimental serum designed to give people superhuman strength. With his funding about to get pulled, Norman tested it on himself to prove it worked. It half worked. The strength came, but it took his mind with it. By the time he was on his feet again, there were two men inside him. The press named the second one the same way they had named Spider-Man. They called him the Green Goblin. The Goblin didn't like heroes. He thought the world ran better when men like him were the ones at the top, and Spider-Man was a problem he intended to solve. So he made it his mission to take him out. The two went at it from the Queensboro Bridge to an abandoned building on Roosevelt Island, and in the end, the Goblin's own arrogance got him. He came at Peter with his glider one last time. Peter dodged. The glider didn't. Norman was gone. Before Norman went, he asked Peter for one last thing: don't tell Harry. Peter, still in shock from finding out who the Goblin really was, agreed. He carried Norman's body back to the Osborn penthouse to give him a proper return home. That's where Harry walked in. He saw Spider-Man standing over his father's body, and from that moment on, there was only one story he could tell himself. At the funeral a few days later, Harry made a vow. He would find a way to make Spider-Man pay for what he'd done. Across the multiverse, on Earth 701306, another blind boy from Hell's Kitchen had grown up. Only this one had been doing it years before the one we covered on Earth 616 was even born. His childhood story almost rhymes with the one we already met. Same neighborhood, same kind of chemicals, same loss of sight. Same boxer father taken out by mobsters when he was still a kid, the same reason he eventually picked up a mask. By 2003, this Matt Murdock was a defense attorney by day and a masked vigilante by night. They called him Daredevil. That same year, he met a woman named Elektra, the daughter of a wealthy businessman, and for a few brief moments, something between them started to bloom, until her father made the wrong call. Nicholas Nachios had been business partners with the local crime boss, the Kingpin, for years. Now he was trying to walk away. But nobody walks away from a man like the Kingpin and lives to talk about it. So the Kingpin sent a hitman named Bullseye to take care of him. Daredevil tried to stop it and lost. Elektra was there when it happened, and from her angle, only one story made sense. She came after Daredevil for revenge, blaming him for what happened to her father, before realizing Bullseye was the one she actually wanted. She went after him herself and didn't make it back. By the time Daredevil arrived, the woman he had been falling for was gone. Now it was personal. He hunted Bullseye down to a church, and during the fight, Bullseye gave up the Kingpin's real name, Wilson Fisk. The same Fisk whose men had taken out Jack Murdock all those years ago. The man Matt had spent his whole life hunting had been right in front of him the entire time. Daredevil ended Bullseye's career with a fall from a church window. Then he came for Fisk, beat him to within an inch of his life, and chose to spare him in the end. Sometime later, Matt was back on the rooftop where he and Elektra had first kissed. He found a pendant lying there with her name engraved on it in Braille. Elektra was alive, and somewhere out there, she was already finding her way back to a different kind of life. 2 years later, Elektra would get her own story. After what happened in the church, she had been brought back by a blind martial arts master named Stick, the last keeper of an ancient discipline called Kimagure. Stick's order, the Chaste, had been at war with the Hand for centuries. He took her in, taught her the art, and tried to give her a second chance. But Elektra had been carrying something since she was a little girl. Her mother had been taken right in front of her, and the face of the man who did it had haunted her dreams ever since. The rage that came with that memory was something even Stick couldn't pull out of her, and eventually, he sent her away. Elektra spent the years that followed as a contract operative. taking high-paying jobs from anonymous clients. Then one of those clients gave her a job with strange conditions. She was supposed to spend a few days on an island before being told who the targets were. During those few days, she got to know a man named Mark Miller and his 13-year-old daughter, Abby. Then the names came down. Mark and Abby were the targets. Elektra refused the job and walked away. But somewhere on the road back, something stopped her. For the first time in her adult life, Elektra felt something she hadn't been able to feel since she was a little girl. She turned around and went back. By the time she got there, the hand was already coming. They had come for Abby. The girl turned out to be what they called the Treasure, a once-in-a-generation prodigy whose powers would tip the long war one way or the other. The hand sent its best after them, including Karigi, the son of the hand's master. When Elektra finally stood face to face with him, she realized something else. Karigi was the same man who had taken her mother all those years ago. The horned demon from her nightmares had a name. Elektra protected the girl. She took on Karigi, took on the hand's deadliest weapons, and when the dust settled, the truth about the contract finally came out. The anonymous client who had sent her after Mark and Abby in the first place had been Stick. The same master who had thrown her out for being too consumed by rage had set the whole thing up as a test, to see if she had finally learned compassion. By the end, Abby was safe, the hand had been pushed back, and Elektra walked away from the contract life for good. That's the last we'll see of Earth 701306. We're not going back. 2 years later, in 2004, back on Earth 96283, Peter Parker was struggling. The double life had ground him down. He was failing his classes, behind on rent, losing the girl he loved, and his powers were starting to flicker out on him. While Peter was falling apart, a brilliant scientist named Dr. Otto Octavius was running an experiment that was supposed to change the world. A fusion reactor that would give the planet limitless energy. To control it, he had attached himself to a set of artificial intelligence-driven mechanical arms. The experiment failed. The arms fused permanently to his spine. The AI took over what was left of his mind, and Otto came back changed, obsessed with finishing the experiment that had ruined him, no matter the cost. He came to the conclusion that he needed a bigger reactor this time, big enough to actually hold the reaction. So he started funding it the only way he had left, by robbing banks. The press, doing what the press always did in this city, gave him a name, Dr. Octopus. But the reactor needed one specific element to run, tritium, and there was only one place to get it, Oscorp, which was now run by Harry Osborn, who had been waiting years for someone to bring him Spider-Man's head on a plate. Harry agreed to hand over the tritium on one condition. Octavius had to deliver Peter, alive or otherwise. And Octavius did. That's when Harry finally found out the face behind the mask belonged to his best friend. He couldn't go through with it, and there was no time anyway. Otto still had Mary Jane, and the only person who could go get her back was Spider-Man. Harry let Peter go. The reactor Octavius built with the tritium was big enough to take Manhattan with it. Peter caught up to him before it could. He managed to reach the man still buried somewhere inside Dr. Octopus. Otto chose his own end, taking his reactor down with him. Peter walked away from the fight as something close to whole. Mary Jane had seen his face by then, so she knew everything. As for Harry, the discovery had already broken something inside him. He had let Spider-Man go. But that didn't mean he was done with him. The Goblin's son was about to become a problem of his own. Back on Earth 26,320, the vampires Blade had spent his life hunting were tired of being hunted. The FBI had been on Blade's trail for a while too, convinced he was a vigilante taking down innocent people based on conspiracy theories about vampires. So the vampires gave them what they needed. They used a human, dressed up to look like one of their own, and made sure Blade took him out with witnesses and cameras rolling. The footage went straight to the authorities. Just like that, the world's most wanted vampire hunter became the world's most wanted man. The FBI picked him up, and for the first time, Blade was off the board. He didn't stay there for long. A team of underground vampire fighters called the Night Stalkers, led by a sharpshooter named Abigail Whistler and a quick-witted operator named Hannibal King, broke him out and brought him in on what the vampires had really been planning. They had gone all the way back to the beginning of their species and woken up the first one of them, Drake. Or, as the human world had come to call him over the centuries, Dracula. The vampires wanted his ancient blood, Drake was the only one of them who could walk in sunlight, and they were going to use his bloodline to remake the entire vampire race in his image. A world of Daywalkers, where humans had nowhere left to hide. What the vampires didn't know was that the Night Stalkers had been quietly working on something of their own. The Night Stalkers were a new generation of hunters, and from where they stood, Blade's one-man crusade with a sword and a few silver rounds was already outdated. The future of this war was going to be fought with science. They had a blind scientist on the team named Summerfield, and Summerfield had been developing a bioweapon called Daystar, a virus engineered to wipe out vampires at the genetic level. The compound itself was ready, but to actually wipe out the entire species, the virus needed to be activated by the blood of the original vampire himself, Drake's blood. Drake came to them while Blade and Abigail were out. He tore through the Night Stalkers' hideout, took out most of the team, including Summerfield herself, and walked off with Hannibal King and Summerfield's young daughter Zoe as hostages. By the time Blade and Abigail got back, the place was a graveyard. But Summerfield had left them something. A video recording, made before the attack, just in case. In it, she confirmed what they already knew. The virus was there, but it needed Drake's blood to reach its full effect. She also gave them one last warning. There was a chance the virus might take Blade with them. Blade and Abigail had no choice now. They had to come for Drake, both to get their people back and to put the virus inside the one vampire it was designed for. They hit Drake's base hard. Abigail put an arrow into him carrying the virus, and as Drake's blood activated it, the entire bloodline crumbled into dust around them. The first vampire fell, and so did everyone who had inherited his blood. In 2005, on a brand new reality, Earth 121698, the Fantastic Four we already met on Earth 828 came together a different way. Reed Richards had a theory that a passing cosmic cloud could rewrite human DNA. To study it up close, he needed something he didn't have: money, and a space station built to take that kind of impact. So he turned to an old college friend who had both. Victor Von Doom, billionaire, owner of an orbital research station rigged with shields designed for exactly this kind of cosmic event. Victor agreed to bankroll it. Reed brought his oldest friend, Ben Grimm, and his ex-girlfriend Sue Storm, who had since become Victor's right hand at the company. Sue's younger brother Johnny came along too. The five of them went up and started the mission. That's when the catastrophe hit. Reed had miscalculated the cloud's path. It arrived hours ahead of schedule. The shields didn't have time to come up, and every person on that station got caught right in the middle of it, Victor included. They made it back to Earth alive and convinced they had walked away from it. Then they were placed in quarantine for observation, and that's when the powers started showing up. Reed's body wouldn't stay the shape it was supposed to be. Sue could disappear. Johnny could burn. But Ben got the worst hand of all. The radiation had turned him into living rock that he couldn't change back from. He slipped out of the facility to find his fiancée Debbie, the woman he was supposed to spend his life with. She took one look at him and ran. Ben ended up alone on the Brooklyn Bridge. That's where the rest of them found him. A scene unfolded on that bridge that morning, and by the time it was over, all four of them had been seen by the public using what they had become to save people. The press gave them the name that would stick: the Fantastic Four. Victor came back changed too, but for him, it wasn't just powers. The radiation had begun turning his body into living metal, and his mind right along with it. His company had been days away from going public when the accident happened. The disaster sent the stock into freefall. His board pushed him out, and just like that, everything he had built was gone. He blamed Reed for all of it. While the four of them got the headlines and the fame, Victor watched it all from the wreckage of his old life and got worse with every passing day. Reed had brought the team back to his old place, the Baxter Building, to figure out what they had become. He made Ben a promise the day they got back. He would find a way to fix him. Reed got to work on it, but he also got back close to Sue, the woman he should never have let walk away in the first place. And somewhere in the middle of finding his way back to her, the cure stopped getting his full attention. Ben watched the man who had promised to give him his old life back start building a new one of his own, and the resentment started to grow. That's when Doom moved. He had been waiting for a way in, and Ben was it. He fed Ben lies, twisted Reed's silence into betrayal, and turned the strongest member of the team against the man who needed him most. By the time Ben realized he had been played, Doom was already on top of Reed. Ben came back for his team. The four of them fought Doom together, beat him, froze him in place, and shipped him back to his home country of Latveria. 2 years later, in 2007, this same Earth got its second crisis. A figure on a silver surfboard came riding down through the atmosphere, leaving holes in the ground wherever he passed. Johnny was the first one to lay eyes on him, and after the encounter, he gave him a name that stuck: the Silver Surfer. On this Earth, the Silver Surfer was a man instead of a woman. His name was Norrin Radd. He was the Herald of Galactus, the cosmic being who would arrive next, ready to consume the planet whole. You know the drill by now. Galactus showed up as a massive cloud of cosmic energy hanging in the sky over Earth, and the Fantastic Four had no idea how to stop something that big. But Norrin Radd had spent centuries leading worlds to their end for his master, and somewhere in him, a line had been crossed for the last time. He turned on Galactus, and he gave his life sending the cloud away from Earth. The planet survived, the Fantastic Four went home, and we leave Earth 121698 behind.